Good afternoon, and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Andy Carlson. I'm a principal with Mario. We're a consultancy that helps customers achieve sustainable. We've had a privilege to be working with Nextworld for a couple of years now. Before we get started, let me talk about some logistics. We're going to mute your lines until the Q&A period at the end. And if you want to ask questions during the session, you can use the chat feature to do that, and we're monitoring that, and we may take your question at the end or during the webinar, depending on what makes the most sense. We'd ask you to please mute your video during the call. It'll make things probably go better logistically, if you don't mind. You can unmute at the end during the Q&A if you'd like. We are recording today's webinar, and it'll be available afterwards. And then I'd like to announce that one of the attendees at today's webinar will be randomly selected to get a free ERP strategy session with Steltix, and we'll notify that lucky winner via email. So let's get to it. As my guest today, I am pleased to welcome Jaap Weerstand and Konrad Rogers. They're going to talk about the exciting partnership between Steltix and Nextworld. And I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves this afternoon. So go ahead. Why don't we start with you, Jaap?
Thank you, Andy. And I should have gotten a different name. And that works a bit better in American, I guess. Jaap Weerstand works very good if you're not American. But you do a pretty good job pronouncing it, so that's a good thing, I guess. Very happy to be here. I'm Jaap Weerstand, CEO at Steltix. We are an ERP implementation partner in Europe and South Africa.
Konrad?
Hey, Andy. My name is Konrad Rogers. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Nextworld.
Okay, great. Okay, so Jaap, I'm going to start with you. I wanted to find out to start the call, like, what are you hearing from your customers that led you to Nextworld?
Well, Andy, we have been implementing Oracle ERP and different ERP systems, but predominantly Oracle for more than 20 years in Europe. And it's pretty good software, ERP software. It does a very well job in all the basic business processes. The issue that most of these softwares have is that the value of making it really fit for your own, for the customer's business processes are sitting in little tweaks or customizations that you do on the outskirts of it. Or maybe, you know, integrations that you create or connections with different other systems. And actually that is kind of the biggest issue that our customers, all of them, are facing. We serve some of our customers for 20 years already, so we've been doing the initial implementation, then we went through maybe a series of upgrades. We help them on their day-to-day support. And actually the bits of software that are closest to their business process, that are a bit custom if you want, that actually also yield the biggest value for them, are the hardest to maintain and probably the most expensive to maintain, because it makes it hard for them to upgrade, because all of these bits need special attention. And it seems like over time that becomes a drag. More and more time is associated with keeping the most important parts of your software up to date. And it kind of, you know, evolves from there. That's the biggest issue. ERP users generally have a very hard time keeping up with technology most of the time because of customizations.
Got it. Yeah, that's good. Konrad, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I mean, we've done quite a bit of research as well in terms of the pain points, and we have heard things very similar to what Jaap said. One of those themes was that customers were frustrated with the amount of, well, number one, the amount of resource budget you have, monetary resources, people, that it took just to keep their IT systems, their ERP systems going, right? Ed used to refer to this as, you know, whack-a-mole. IT manager would come in and all of his resources would be focused on what's the issue that came up today that I need to address, just to keep the system working the way it was working yesterday. Mm-hmm. And what that really meant was all the IT budget, all the resources, the labor was really focused on the status quo. And so there's some frustration with that, because if you're going to spend that kind of money and invest that at that level, you want that to help the business, right? To focus on innovation. So the frustration was, you know, if you got 90-10 or 80-20, where most of that, the 80 or the 90 is being focused on the status quo and whack-a-mole and just keeping things running the way they were yesterday. Well, what we were hearing is our customers wanted a platform where they could start to inverse that ratio, where, you know, things are going to happen. Obviously, you're going to have to put some effort into making sure that you sustain your ERP or your technical system that's supporting your business. But if more of that investment could be focused on innovation and helping the business, then that would be much more desirable. And then the other thing that we heard from that Jaap kind of touched on was, and that I've heard succinctly said by a customer to me was, you know, I'm really frustrated because I'm not a technology business, but I know I need to be technology savvy. And I feel like I found myself in this cul-de-sac where I actually have to be a technology company in order to leverage technology to stay competitive. And if I wanted to be a technology company, I would have been, but I'm not. You know, I'm in construction or real estate or CPG or whatever that might be.
And then can you go on and just elaborate a little bit on why the partnership with Steltix is important to you?
Well, important to me, I'd have to take a step back because really it has nothing to do with the technology and all that. It comes down to culture. So at Nextworld, we feel that our corporate culture, and this may be unsurprising if you look at our background with Ed McVaney and some of us growing up in our early days at JD Edwards, culture is our foundation. And culture is the foundation of every company, whether they admit it or not. Everything that they deliver, everything they create is based on a foundation of their culture. We've decided that we're going to define ours, we're going to talk about it, and we're going to be held accountable to it because people know what we feel we stand for. And what we saw in Steltix is a reflection of that culture as well. And a key component of that is long-term customer relationships. That's a key part of our culture, and we feel it's a key part of our business model going forward. It's the only way we're going to be successful. And when you talk to Steltix, the importance of the customer and the long-term relationship just comes through in every conversation. So really, the first thing and with Steltix for me and for Nextworld was the cultural fit. And then you get into the more obvious, their knowledge of the market and the region that we can leverage because we're not there, we're not based in that region. They have that expertise and they can bring that to bear.
And Jaap, do you want to add anything to that now that we've kind of summarized how you guys are working together?
Yeah, I was thinking about whether everybody in the audience understands what whack-a-mole is. That is pretty American as well. But it's a pretty good, it explains pretty well where the time gets lost, right? In our customers, a lot of the business analysts are literally whacking the moles every day and they're not keeping up with technology. So I just figured that is also, I don't think that is a game that we play in Europe a lot. But and if we play it, we probably don't call it whack-a-mole. But I want to echo what Konrad is saying. Our customers have been our customers for 20 years, and we want to be, and we need to be very close to our customers in order to address the issues that they have across Europe. Because also, unlike America, I cannot go anywhere 200 miles, or I'll be sitting in a completely different country. After Brexit, actually with different currency as well again. So I guess what customers expect from their ERP software is that we solve the multicultural, multi-company, multi-currency issues for them. And then also keep up with all the legislation that are basically, it gets invented on a yearly basis. So their ERP software needs to be able to do that, and they shouldn't waste time with the obvious keeping up, whacking the moles. I keep coming back to the whacking the moles.
So I wanted to come back to the Nextworld story because Konrad mentioned Ed McVaney. The story is really interesting, and I thought maybe next we would let you elaborate a little bit on how Nextworld got going.
So it's probably been about 5 years ago now. Ed had, I guess it might have been his last, but every few years, Ed McVaney would have a JD Edwards reunion up at his ranch in the mountains of Colorado. And at that, several years ago, he got into, as he often did, into a discussion / debate about how things might be different today with Axel Allgaier if they went back and they tried to recreate some of the platform that they had created in the early to mid 90s, the tool set. And so that conversation actually kept going, and then and eventually led to the creation of Nextworld, because as we started discussing what the differences would be if we started from the ground up and just started fresh in the technical environment we found ourselves today, we realized just how many things had changed. And we realized just what kind of differentiating functionality we'd be able to actually produce if we were given the opportunity to create something from scratch. And the real lesson there is it's really hard to take advantage of everything an enterprise or a development environment has to offer you if you're not rewriting it, if you're not writing it from scratch, right? And designing it from scratch. And so those conversations led to the creation of Nextworld, and probably about 10 months after that.
Okay, that's good. Okay, so I wanted to dig in a little more to this, these issues that Jaap started with in terms of what customers are facing. Jaap, maybe you could elaborate a little bit on why kind of legacy ERP isn't meeting the needs.
Well, that is a good point, and it touches on what Konrad said as well. So we as Steltix have a responsibility for our customers. They all run ERP systems that were invented 10 years ago, and some of them, or 20 years ago, and some of them do a great effort keeping up with technology, but a lot of times it's just a small layer on top of very old software. And some of this software actually has a timeline, an end date associated with it, right? So we need to make a statement to our customers of what we think should be the next step. And I think any next step, if you make decisions about ERP software today, should be a true cloud ERP. In a sense, all of our latest implementations have been cloud on Amazon or Google or Oracle or what have you. That doesn't make it cloud. You're just running it on someone else's computer. What we were very impressed with in Nextworld is that is real cloud ERP software. Actually, Konrad was, when I was there, I think it's now 2-3 years ago, was one of the first that really could explain me the benefits of the cloud. In that if you give your ERP system a lot of you run a big MRP job or whatever, you want something very complicated. True ERP software should be capable for you to cater for that and automatically scale up so that you literally get your job done. And after that, it scales back down to what's normal. And as a user, you shouldn't have anything to do with that. The current ERP systems that we deploy in anyone's cloud, basically we just put it on someone else's computer, doesn't do that, right? It's not designed from the ground up to be a cloud software. That is one very important thing. And the second thing is, what I started saying is, the true value for business software for our customers sits in those specific customizations made by the customer. The most value sits there. So also what ERP should do, it should work so that those customizations way more easy survive upgrades. And you should be able to keep up with innovations almost automatically, not have to go back to your customization and review, is that code still good? Because that is the biggest pain for our customers nowadays. So that's why we looked at Nexbot and said, well, if there is a future alternative, then that's the only real one that has both of these elements in it. And that's basically a short story of it.
So Konrad, maybe you could give us that story that you told Jaap about what is the true cloud.
Well, we were just talking about, I've worked in a lot of different enterprise software systems over the years: JD Edwards, PeopleSoft, Siebel, Oracle Fusion, which I guess is now Oracle Cloud Applications. And what I've seen happen over and over again is that a new wave of technology will come out, right? I started as an RPG programmer on the JD Edwards World System, and that was really a mainframe mid-range green screen solution. And in the mid-90s, client server started to come out, and everybody was very fixated on the user experience that client server could offer by leveraging, the client resources and splitting your computing between the two, etc. Windows. I'm not a huge fan of Windows myself, if you know me, but that is what the market wanted. And so what all the mid-range and green screen vendors did, they took a very similar approach. was they put a screen scraper on their green screen, and it had a few colors and it emulated some mouse movements. And then they all marketed themselves as, hey, we're client server too. And for JD Edwards, that manifested itself in a product called World Vision. And if any of you have had experience with it, it wasn't hugely successful. But the products that were successful were, R3, JD Edwards Enterprise One, which was a complete rewrite into a client server architecture, Oracle EBS, PeopleSoft, etc. Right? And why? Well, it was because they rewrote from the ground up. JD Edwards did the same thing. I was part of it with Everest, and took advantage of that client server architecture and environment. Well, you fast forward a few years, right past Y2K, and now the competitive environment has changed again, because there are new capabilities possible, and you had cloud now, and you saw products like Salesforce and Workday and NetSuite, right? Late 90s, early O's. And the client server vendors, they all did the same thing. They did the same recipe book. They took their server-side components from their client server architecture. They put them in a data center. If their client wasn't already URL addressable, they made it URL addressable by hook or by crook. And I know it was by hook or by crook because I've worked in those product suites. And it is, like Jaap mentioned, it was a thin veneer of a web client, right? And that's still the design principle of those products. And then they marketed themselves and said, hey, we're cloud vendors too. But obviously, they really weren't. And it didn't work because they weren't able to take advantage of everything that a cloud environment had to offer. And one of those things is something that Jaap mentioned, which is elasticity. Because you have complete control, you can scale up and scale down if you've architected correctly, fluidly, based on the requests that you see coming in. And so if you have a big batch run or whatever, if you're using a stateless architecture, a true cloud native architecture, you don't need to log a service request to have service deployed before you submit that job. The system is monitoring that and just spins up those servers, spins up those resources, and when there is no more need, spins them back down, right? And that's just one small aspect of an advantage a true cloud solution built from the ground up can take advantage of, because you actually designed for it from the very, very beginning. And that's critical. You're designing for it from the very, very beginning. And so if you look at when a lot of these quote unquote cloud products were built, right, they were designed in the late 90s or early O's. None of them came out platform first, which hopefully we talk about later. Hopefully I have a chance to talk about why that's such, I feel, a game changer, because that is something that has changed in the last 5 years or so that we're taking advantage of. But that's really what it comes down to. In order to really take advantage of everything that an environment has to offer, it has to be there, and you have to be designed to weave it into your product and your architecture. And that's what we've done.
That's great. So Jaap mentioned a couple other things that I wanted to dig into. The importance of customizations and how those play a key role. And I think that relates to the pace of innovation and how that's changing. And then secondly, the amount of budget within most IT organizations that's increasingly going to maintaining those versus doing new things.
So do you want me to address that, Andy?
Sure, you can start, Konrad. I'd like to hear from both you guys, though.
Okay. So one thing on the customizations, which I agree with Jaap, that's a huge piece of the puzzle, is the fact that from the very beginning, we acknowledge that customizations are a key differentiator, and for us, for Nextworld, and that platform-first approach has to deliver the ability for the customer to create and tailor the solution to their specific needs. And you can't predict those, right? A development organization cannot predict all the different permutations that a customer is going to need to incorporate into the software to meet their unique business challenges. So build that in and make that a hard requirement for every story, every use case that's delivered. And so we've actually done that. We have a saying here that customization shouldn't be a dirty word, but it is. So with our solution, we've got to change that, so that when a patch comes out, when an upgrade comes out, when a new release comes out, customers should not be thinking about or worried about, is my customization going to keep working, right? It has to be sustainable. And so when we say we have sustainable customizations, that's because we built that in and we designed that in from the first line of code.
Yeah, that's really cool. So Jaap, what do you think that will enable then in the implementation and kind of maintaining that software through time?
Well, I think Konrad knows way more of the technology of how those guys did it, but they have done it. Basically, what Nextworld allows you to do is build those customizations in the exact same framework as the rest of the application is built in. You'll find as your distribution, manufacturing, what have you. But the nice thing is, it's going to survive every upgrade that platform is doing. So not only is it automatically upgrading, but automatically you have a platform that is, and I think Konrad may touch on that later, that whole platform is able to survive new technology waves by design. So it's two things. Those customizations not only survive within the realms of that ERP software, but the whole ERP software is able to survive new technology waves. So it's a bit bigger than just a smart upgrade process or whatever. It's pretty huge for customers. So automatically, when they adopt to this platform, they are always in line with the latest technology and able to keep up with technology, and they can forget about whacking walls.
So you guys have both mentioned this platform thing. So it sounds like something truly new.
Yes,
absolutely, yeah. I mean, let me delve into it a little bit then. So our approach is platform first. So we spent the first, I don't know, approximately 2 years of our existence just focused on the platform, because the platform, the Nextworld platform, is a set of features that is specifically tailored and designed to solve the problems of an ERP application, a transaction-heavy application. Okay, so what we did first is we built out a set of features that any application might want to use. Things like authorization, a common directory, workflow, reporting, cube builder, things like that. Then we surface those through a set of tools we call Nexbot. Now, Nexbot has things like an applications builder. It has a report builder. It has a cube builder. It has auto testing builder, right? Those are the platform tools you're using. Then what we did is we ourselves hired application developers and built out, using Nexbot, that set of tools, a set of core horizontal, I'll call it horizontal, but ERP functionality. Things like financials, AP, AR, fixed assets, job coster, some people call it projects, distribution, sales, procurement, inventory, manufacturing, discrete process job, things like that. So a core set of functionality using the Nexbot toolset. That's the Nextworld platform. And that's is sold, right, in terms of families like financials or distribution or whatever. Then we provide that platform as part of the solution to every customer. So when it comes down to customizations, the customer is actually extending the software or building new things that they need using exactly the same tool set that we used to build the base product. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah, very good. Yeah.
So what that really allows us to do is, by designing that platform as a completely no-code platform, not low-code, no-code, zero, no backdoor. So if you're familiar with JD Edwards, there is no ANSI C business function exception to the platform. There's no way to inject code into the platform. And that's very, very important to us. It's a zero-code platform, no-code platform. It allows us to meet the vision that we have of ourselves, that we are not producing something that requires a professional developer to use, right? So you don't have a computer science degree or MIS degree, no problem. Do you know your problem set? We are providing a platform for a subject matter expert to be able to use it to create the applications that they need or extend the ones that are delivered to them.
Well, that sounds truly revolutionary. So you don't have to be a programmer to do customizations. Is that what I'm hearing?
Correct. And there's a wide swath of functionality that's available to you, but it's approachable. And all you need is a Wi-Fi connection and a browser, right? I was telling Jaap a while ago when we were actually flying out before the pandemic to Amsterdam to meet with him. Kylee and I, the CEO, and I were on a plane, and we had Wi-Fi, and we were struggling because she had a headcount. I'm sure some of you might have a similar experience. Had a headcount spreadsheet and a system of spreadsheets we were using to manage our recruiting and our interviewing and our hiring. Because at the time we were quite small, and I had a copy of that spreadsheet as well, and they didn't match. It was very frustrating. So we found out there were 3 or 4 different versions of this thing running around. So we, on the airplane, we actually just wrote a simple application to replace that spreadsheet, right? It's a very simple example, but we just fired up the app builder, created our table, created an app on top of it, and then rolled that out. And then it's grown in time, over time, but we're still using that core app that we built on that flight today. So it's approachable, it's fast, but it does have a lot of depth in terms of complexity. So you can write very complex applications, but if you're going to write a simple application to replace a spreadsheet or create a simple database, that's pretty straightforward.
So, that's a great example, because I've certainly heard that, the less flexibility there is, the more, what's the term, rogue IT that you tend to find out in the organization. And spreadsheets are a great example of that, just like you just mentioned. Starts with a couple, but over time, hundreds of spreadsheets can exist out there to solve problems. So what I'm hearing is you could potentially replace those within the application itself.
Yeah, I think really one of the values of having and deploying a platform is that you can start to simplify your IT landscape, right? You have these situations present themselves, small, medium-sized challenges that you're going to have, that you want to have an access database or a spreadsheet or some tactical thing that you need. Well, if you have a platform at your fingertips that you can just whip that out, well, now you've actually created something on a platform you're already using. You haven't expanded your technical landscape. A year from now, you're not going to run into, well, how do I support this? You're already supporting it, right? It's your core ERP system as well. So it's over time simplifies that landscape, or has the opportunity to do so.
So everybody, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Everybody's going to have some third-party applications. Can you speak a little bit to integrations, perhaps, too, and how those are handled?
So integrations are pretty important because the world of having that single solution that everybody uses, like you had back in the days of the green screen, are obviously gone. So no matter how large or small an organization is, they're going to have integration requirements. So our design principle on that is integrations as a first-class citizen, meaning that we have to be thinking about how is the information from the system that we're writing going to get in and out to other systems. And one tangible example of that is that when you're using the Nextworld platform and building applications through Nexbot, underneath the covers for all of your objects, we're actually creating a REST endpoint. So if you create a table, when you generate that table, you're creating a REST endpoint. The app developer doesn't have to know what a REST endpoint is. That's not important. What's important is that we're creating it automatically under the covers for you, and then that can be used. And so logic blocks, tables, apps, all those kinds of things. Our own client, and today our client is a JavaScript Angular browser-based client, and then some native iPhone or iOS and Android apps actually use those same REST APIs that an integrations call is going to use. So it's one single REST layer in and out of our stateless architecture. So if you're going to integrate, you're actually calling the same APIs that our own client calls when you create a sales order or update a directory record or anything like that. And then we built in, for non-real-time use cases, the import-export functionality with some transformation capabilities and all that kind of stuff. So integrations is something we assume everybody's going to do, and we certainly want to make it as easy as possible, and certainly not make them feel that they're being punished for having to integrate in other systems.
Yeah, that's great. So Jaap, it sounds like this is going to bring some real new capabilities as you bring these products to market and work directly with the customers in implementation.
Yes, I think this is, I mean, if you think of it, and I heard the story obviously a lot of times before, but every time I'm thinking how huge this is, because this has to have an effect on even your staffing requirements. You don't need your own technical staff so much. You need people that understand your business and then can basically just transform that into requirements for Nextworld. And that's what we have done for 20 years. And I'm looking forward to be able to spend more time with the customer's business and less time with their technology, because the technology is going to be governed by Nextworld, which is important because it's the no code that makes how this thing works. No one can inject code in that platform. Therefore, Nextworld can guard their own, integrity of the application as such. Because that was kind of the thing that I was trying to compare it with when we first got to know Nextworld, but there's nothing compared to a low-code platform, right? Low-code platforms are also just a layer on top of ERP. They're cool, they're nice, they're quick, but the problems start to occur when there is something that the low-code cannot do, and you find yourself back into code. So basically, you made a grind loop, and you're back with basically having to have developers to make your solution, and that's. That is a huge difference, a completely different approach than the traditional ERPs and all the adjacent systems that you have around that. So I'm very excited to be able to bring that to Europe, yes.
So, Konrad, I'm aware that from your that Nextworld is a relatively young company, but are there some early successes you can share with us?
Yeah, can I build on what Jaap said in terms of no code?
Yeah, sure. We've got time for that.
Because I think there's one aspect of that I want to touch on, and he mentioned how you're not worried about the technology, right? And so I do want to touch on this no code premise, because what we're doing is we're separating out the technology from the business requirements. So when you go into Nexbot, as I described before, all you're doing is creating a blueprint. You're not actually creating code at that time. There's a step within the process where underneath the covers, the platform itself is creating that code. And that's really, really important. And it's important because, as I mentioned, today we're using an Angular browser-based JavaScript client. I know over time, I don't know what it's going to change to, but I know in 10 years, that's not going to be the most compelling way that I can deliver those blueprints that my customers, through their customizations or their own applications development work, or our own app development teams have defined. They've defined all these blueprints for purchase orders and directory records and all these different workflows and all that kind of stuff, right? I know the most compelling way in 10 years will not be the way we're doing it today. And I don't want my customers or my partners worried about what it's going to be. We want our customers and partners to focus on the business problems, those blueprints. And then if we need to change the technology from JavaScript to who knows what in the future from a UI perspective, we can do that. But we can also do that on the server side as well. And so when we say, we use this term future-proof, we're controlling that technical delivery so that our customers don't have to worry about it. We can change it as it makes sense. We're watching out for what's next. So one example of that is kind of reverse, but when we first started working on the platform, we were using a Mongo NoSQL database because that was new and we thought it was very innovative, and it is very innovative. But it didn't meet some of our requirements around transaction-heavy, transaction-centric applications. The transaction support in certain corner cases kind of fell down a little bit. So we came to the decision we have to change it. We're going to have to change the data tier from a NoSQL platform data tier to a relational database framework. And we did that under the covers without our app developers actually realizing that we changed the technology of the database underneath them. And we do those kinds of things all the time. And that's really, really important. And it's only possible in a no-code platform, the way that we've completely separated out the business requirements from the technical delivery. Does that make sense? It'd be easier for me to explain it with a picture, but I tried to paint a picture with my words.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you used the word future-proof because it sounds like you've really separated those things and made it so you're not going to be outdated in the future. So
yeah, exactly, and that's the difference, right? Because there's that step in the process I mentioned, which I'll call a generation. That is a complete rewrite. It happens all the time, but we're actually rewriting the application underneath the covers every single time you do that. So if we go back to what I mentioned before, the only way to take advantage of something in an environment is to rewrite. We've built an architecture with our platform. Applications are actually rewritten. Introduce something new, not require what's been defined by our customers and partners and our own app developers to change and incorporate new technology.
that's great. So we're a few minutes from Q&A. I just want to tell the audience there's a little, if you hover over your screen, there's a little control window that'll pop up. And if you press the three dots, you can get your chat window up. And if you want to ask a question, you can type it into the chat there. So Konrad, can I circle back? I wanted to ask if there's any early success stories you can share. And then I want to talk a little bit about other partners that may be working with the no-code platform.
Yeah, so in this early period, we've really looked for customer fits, right? We haven't thrown the doors open and just immediately allowed a lot of customers in because we need to make sure that the fit of what we have to offer matches their specific business requirements they have. And already we've got a few success stories of those early customers. In financial services is probably the largest effort that recently completed, where they went live in under a year, and we took them. They're a bigger company than we probably initially thought we wanted to take this early, but they were really great to work with. And what they've done is they've consolidated several different systems, financial services systems, into one, and then they're looking to use the platform to actually take that even further. So we worked with them to consolidate and run all of their financials on Nextworld, replacing a legacy system, bringing over their historical data. And then a couple that Jaap mentioned, they had some credit card processing and some very specific things to their business that they eliminated by a combination of leveraging our integrations technology and the platform to create some functionality such that they didn't need to have another vendor. So that is pretty exciting. So.
Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about go back to no code and the whole idea of being able to develop things and develop them quickly. We talked about it in the context of customizations. What about partners and allowing partners to do work on the platform? Is that something that's occurring?
Yes, so we have different types of partners. One partner type that we call a solution developer. And as I mentioned before, as part of the platform, there's that core horizontal ERP functionality. For many industries and for many customers, that's going to be plenty. However, there are certain industries that have very specific functionality that they need. And so solution developers come in, they extend the core by using Nexbot and create that industry-specific functionality, and then package that and deliver it with the product. And we're doing it in a much different way than other vendors based on our experience with other ERP systems in the past. We've decided that those solution developers are actually going to build on the same code line that our own developers that are building core developing on. So when we do a quote unquote release to our release pipeline, it contains all of the partner solutions tested and verified before they ever hit production and are available. And that is something that is very, very different. So the solution developers that are building industry specific functionality are working one sprint, which is 2 weeks, behind the core Nextworld applications development teams. So we give them our sprint, they work on it, and then at a certain point, we deliver everything, which includes the partner content as well.
Okay, so I've heard a lot of really interesting and what I consider to be new things today. I thought maybe we could summarize a little bit some of the main points that we talked about. We mentioned future-proof and customizations. So, what are the key differentiators that Nextworld is delivering to the marketplace through partners like Steltix?
Well, I think there's only one ERP that allows us to bring both a basic ERP solution to our customers and at the same time allow customers to add customer-specific business processes to it, but it will be in the same platform. I mean, that is huge. And it's not just that we are delivering that as a platform today, but they are, embarking on a journey that makes sure that they're always on top of the latest innovations. That is, I think no other ERP vendor is able to do that at all at the moment. And that is a big deal to our customers. I think that summarizes it. Konrad can use a lot of more technical words to say the same thing, I guess, but that's basically what it is.
Yeah, that's basically what it is.
Okay, that's great. Okay, well, I do have a couple questions that have come in, and I'm going to start to take those. So I'll start with one that just came in on the chat. We have a question: how ready is your solution to be implemented in Europe for a company in manufacturing, distribution, and sales with customers worldwide?
So that comes down to our early adopter program. We really have to evaluate specifically each customer in the early adopter period. We are focused on globalizations, localizations, translations. The release that's coming out in 21.1 is largely focused on those areas. But with each customer, I think with each prospect that comes, we want to make sure in this early adopter period, we're going to allow a select number of customers in. So we're not looking at getting as many customers as possible. Goes back to our culture, which we're not really focused on like going public and all that. So we're not looking at getting numbers of customers. We're looking at getting quality customers. And early on, that means fit. So financials, distribution, and manufacturing, that's the functional footprint we are building. Depending on the specific manufacturing requirements that you may have, the release we have available now and in early 21 may not be a fit, and because we're still working on some pieces of that. So we'd have to talk specifically with each customer to make sure that there is that fit and make sure it's right for both parties. Otherwise, we're not going to meet that other cultural tenet, which is a long-term customer relationship. So we will have a more, over time, a more general answer where no matter what functional footprint you need within those three areas, because that is really our focus, we're going to be able to say yes. But currently in our early adopter period, we want to go case by case and really look at the specifics, make sure that we have what the customer needs.
Can I say something to that as well? What Nextworld has done, whatever they did in a very thoughtful manner, they wanted to, because they wanted to create great software. And I think when it comes to creating globalization, localization, they take the same approach. I mean, other ERP vendors kind of bolt stuff on us if they run into it. Ooh, French has this requirement, let's put it on. We worked with them already for I think a year now, or maybe longer, a year and a half, to really figure out what is the best way to put also European localizations in the core of the product where it belongs. And so we're not looking for 10 customers to run into issues with, but one customer that is willing to help us develop all those localizations in the proper way.
Okay, I think that there's another question that relates to that, and maybe I'll throw that one out at you guys as well. What about languages and localizations? Are they in charge of the partners, or is there central coordination and development from Nextworld like a typical ERP producer?
Is that you, Konrad, or is that me?
Yeah. So it's a bit of a combination. In working with our partners, we're looking at what are the lessons that have been learned with the approaches to localizations in the past. And in many cases, having the localizations as a part of the core product, directed by the source of the localizations through our partners and otherwise, seems to be the right thing to do. Obviously using the platform, because there is no exception to using the platform. So much of it is centrally coordinated. However, since the platform is being delivered with the product everywhere, any of those tweaks that might be necessary, the platform can be used to solve those as well. So it's a bit of a combination that the localization's core requirements are essentially directed, but the platform is there to fill in any gaps as well if needed. And Jaap, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that.
No, I think that's well, that's exactly that. Things like multi-language, multi-currency obviously are part of the base platform. VAT is going to be part of the base platform. Most of the VAT reporting is part of the base platform. Cool thing is, if we run into a connection with the Spanish government, that it doesn't really matter whether we build it, we as a partner build it in, or Konrad does it. It's going to be in the exact same platform. But most of the standard, all the things that you expect that system to have will be delivered by Nextworld. Yeah.
Great. That I think that's a good comprehensive answer from both you guys to that question. So maybe you could describe a little bit more. I had a question about what is core versus what is partner, and kind of what is the philosophy there. I know Konrad touched on it briefly, but maybe Konrad, if you could elaborate on that a little bit more.
So our approach to what we call core, and I know it's not a perfect term, so if anybody has an idea of a better one, I'm open to it. But what we're referring to as core is the common things that the base applications should contain. So when we're looking at financials, or we're looking at localizations, when you look at VAT, we decided that needs to be part of core. That needs to be the part of the base product that's delivered as part of the platform. And then when you get into things like, I'm working pretty closely with a real estate partner right now, SD partner right now, that's building specific functionality for real estate. They have
a solution developer, Konrad?
Solution developer. Okay. They have specific things around leases and tenants, not a technical tenant in terms of multi-tenancy, but a tenant in terms of someone renting an apartment, so to speak, or an office. There's very specific functionality around managing that, and also what those objects are. A lease is a specific type of object, and there's all kinds of things that I don't understand. But not only do I not understand those industry specifics, I don't want to, because Nextworld can't be an industry specialist in everything. We want to leverage industry expertise from those who know it the best. So that's the separation between core or horizontal functionality that serves a wide range of industries versus industry-specific functionality, which we look at these SD partners to deliver. And in certain cases, it could be an ISV partner that's using our integration technology to integrate in. That's also an option that we've seen being used as well. If they don't want, we want everybody to rewrite everything or write everything on Nexbot, but there are examples where you want to integrate it in as well. Did that answer your question, Andy?
Yeah, I think, I kind of combined a couple questions that I had gotten in there, and I think you answered them well. So we do have a question that came in around clients in production and referenceability. I think, that's probably one based on our discussion that we want to take offline, and we can handle that individually. So I acknowledge the question, but unless you guys want to.
Just to touch on, we got these phases, right? So we had phase one where we took a handful of customers, less than half a dozen, right? And we moved them live. So we've got 4 customers live, 100%, all of them referenceable. They were very high touch. That was our phase one. We're moving now into our early adopter phase, where we're opening up to a larger number of customers, but it's not a large number, right? So from each region, we'll take a few customers at most, because as Jaap mentioned before, and this was my experience with, probably won't mention the product, but where we took a cloud product and which was really on-premise underneath, designed, and we released it, and we didn't work closely with the early customers and didn't control that. And so we had dozens of customers implementing the software right out of the gate. 2 months later, we had dozens of escalated unhappy customers. That is not going to happen. So to the question earlier, Jaap and I will be working to make sure that the product is a good fit, that it's a good match for an early adopter period, and it will be a high touch relationship and make sure that that customer is successful. And that's what we've done to date. So all of our phase 1 early adopter customers are all referenceable.
And really, I think you touched on there that, the whole approach that you've taken with Nextworld is very unique, and the runway you've had to, to build the product and build it correctly. Maybe you could elaborate on that as well for a second.
We're blessed with the funding model provided by Ed McVaney, and he was very clear that he did not want us motivated by any aspirations to go public or anything like that. And he realized that delivering an ERP solution is a daunting challenge, and it doesn't happen, you don't complete that overnight. It takes time. It takes a long time. So we've been at this a while. We will be at this a while longer. And so that has been built into our model from day one, which is also the reason why when you look at our leadership, myself, the founders at Nextworld, that appealed to us. We were given the chance to take all the lessons we've learned by working in this ERP development space for the last 20, 25 years, 30 years in some cases with SAP, NetSuite, and JD Edwards, and apply those lessons and build something new in an environment and in a model where they realize that doesn't happen overnight.
Okay, I'm going to dive into maybe 2 more questions, but and then we'll give some closing remarks. This one gets pretty technical. Is it possible for the third-party reporting tools to run SQL directly at the tables if authorized?
No. There is no direct SQL access to our data tier. We have a set of APIs that will allow you to interact with the database, but there is no direct access to our data tier within our infrastructure. And but we have functionality that allows you to pull data out, either real time or batch, right? Imports, exports, as well as a set of REST APIs that you can use. But in terms of direct access, no. And really, I wouldn't want to have to cover that in a SOC 2 audit either. So.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a good point. So that this is also a way to keep your security in one place and stuff. Yeah.
And then maybe a final question. How long does it take to implement Nextworld compared to other solutions?
It's tough to give just a concise answer on that. Each implementation depends on the requirements of that particular customer, especially when it comes to historical data and things like that. But typically, the implementation is much shorter than my experience with other systems. And there's a multitude of reasons for that. Being cloud-based is only one piece of that. But an implementation methodology, clearly articulating how you're going to leverage the functionality and phasing it. But my experience to date, and obviously it's a smaller sample set, has been that it's half, maybe twice as fast. But it's the implementation. What I've seen is they've gone much more quickly than similar implementations that I've dealt with in the past on other product sets.
So maybe related to that, and I'll blend it in, is can you talk a little bit about updates and downtime with a Nextworld solution?
Yeah. So this is the kind of a key point. So when we're doing patching, those are 0 downtime. So when we're patching and doing maintenance of the system, there's no impact to the end users. They can continue using the system. And the only caveat to that is there are periods where we don't want, if a customer is using Nexbot to develop new applications, during that maintenance window, the business users can continue to use the system. And then we ask the developers not to, because they're changing the actual metadata. They're changing those blueprints that we're working with. But from a business usage perspective, completely zero downtime on patches, and then on updates, which we do twice a year, which major updates, the downtime is measured in minutes, perhaps hours. Some of those updates are zero downtime, but sometimes that's when we'll change a database version, or we'll do some data tier changes, or data conversions and things like that. And those, it's safer to do those incurring a small downtime window. Nothing compared to any other product that I've dealt with, much shorter than that. However, those brief windows, maybe once a year, tops twice a year, are necessary. What else did I want to say on that? It's just that upgrades and release upgrades, we call them updates because they're not the same thing, right? When you think of like an upgrade with a ERP system that out there today, that's much different than the experience we're talking about with our updates. And our goal is for updates to be a non-event. Customers should not be basing their calendar and their business calendar around what their vendor's doing, right? And the service that we're providing.
Okay, well, I think we're about out of time for questions. I really appreciate the attendees coming in today. Konrad, Jaap, are there any final things you want to say before we wrap for today?
Well, the most important thing is that we as Steltix with Nextworld start scouting for the perfect customers to work with us, to bring, not only talk about this solution in Europe, but make sure that we start building an installed base in Europe. That's what we're here for. And I think the style, how we style this event, I guess, is not just COVID, but also we want to first try to do things very right and take it from there. But this is, I have no doubt that this is going to be very big.
That's great. And that's a good segue just to close for today. I think that we've got some contact information up on the screen. If you need follow-up besides the what we've talked about today, you can certainly email about that. We are making this recording available, as I mentioned at the start, for anyone who wants it, and we'll be emailing out a link. If you asked a question that we did not answer during the webinar, we apologize for that, and we will respond to that via email as well and get an answer to that question. I wanted to remind you also that today's attendees will be entered to win a free evaluation strategy session with Steltix, and we'll notify the winner via email. So thank you for attending the webinar today, and we wish you a pleasant rest of your day.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks.